Good morning and good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants event. My name is Joe Grabowski, and I'll be your host for today. Today, we're going on one of our favorite virtual field trip adventures. We're heading down to North Carolina to take a little virtual field trip into one of the natural habitat enclosures at the Duke Lemur Center. And joining us will be Education Programs Manager Megan McGrath. So, founded in 1966, the campus at Duke University in Durham is a world leader in the study, care, and protection of lemurs, which are Earth's most threatened group of mammals. So they have more than 200 animals across 14 species, housing the world's largest and most diverse population of lemurs outside their native Madagascar. So I'm going to bring Megan in live with us right now. Hey, Megan, how are we doing today?
Hey, doing great. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you so much to everyone for joining us. Don't worry, this is the only time you'll have to look at my face during the broadcast. Just wanted you to know who's behind the camera, and I'll go ahead and flip things around so you can see the animals we're here to see.
Excellent. Well, I know that breakfast is just being served, so I know they're going to be pretty excited. So I'm going to tuck myself away. I'm going to get a Kahoot ready in the background. But for now, let's meet our friends.
Great. And I'm going to do a quick radio call to let our keeper know that we are ready for food to come out. Give me just one moment. And you'll see kind of movement in the background as the lemurs are kind of hopping around. Oh, there we go. Our keeper's coming this way anyway, so I can let her know that we are good to go for feeding. All right. So as the animals come in, I will introduce you to who is who, and we'll move around. The feeding time is the best time to see the lemurs out here in the forests, or what we call our natural habitat enclosures. You're going to hear that loud bell that Danielle was just ringing, and that is her way of saying it's breakfast time. So think of it kind of like a dinner bell. So the lemurs know food is coming, and if you look just to the back area over there, you can actually see our mongoose lemurs making their way over to their feeding site because they heard the bell and they're following Danielle. So we'll follow as well and hopefully get to see the lemurs hop on over to their site. You can see them, they're in the bamboo over there now and hopping forward. Climbing up and over. And then we have Carolina joining from back behind. And once they get settled at their feeding sites, I'll get a little closer so you can see them and I can introduce them to you. All right, so here we have our mongoose lemurs. So with the white chin on the left here, doing a little bit of scent marking right now, rubbing that area under her tail on her basket. That is Carolina. She is a female, and mongoose lemurs are super easy to tell apart because they are sexually dichromatic, meaning that females and males are different colors, boys and girls are different colors. So we have a white chin on Carolina here, and then if I come around this way, we've got Rico. He's the male or the boy in here, and he's got an orange chin. You can just barely see it now from over there. And so easy to tell them apart because they have that different coloration. That is not the case with all lemurs, but very helpful with our mongoose lemurs to tell them apart. So we have a pair of mongoose lemurs and ring-tailed lemurs living out here in the forest together, and they are going to be fed in separate areas because lemur species do best when they get fed separately. In Madagascar, these species would live hundreds of miles away from each other. The mongoose lemurs we have in front of us, I'll focus on since we have them in front of us. It's a great time to talk about them. Mongoose lemurs are native to the dry deciduous forest in northwestern Madagascar. Madagascar is a huge island. It's the fourth largest island in the world. And if you were to put it in North American terms that we can easily reference, it'd be about the size of California or cover most of the east coast of the United States. So it's a very, very big island. And there's lots of different habitats in between. So up in the northwest, you have deciduous forest, which we see in a lot of North America, with leaves falling off the trees when the seasons change, just like it's happening here in North Carolina and up in Canada right now. And the colors in the leaves are turning very pretty before they fall off. And then on the east coast of Madagascar, you have patches of rainforest because you've got lots of humid air coming in off of the Indian Ocean and getting trapped by a high plateau in the middle of the island. And then down in the very southern tip of the island, you have what's called a spiny forest, spiny desert. Not a very friendly habitat, not the easiest place to live. And that's where you'd find animals like the ring-tailed lemur. So when I say they'd be from really far away from each other in the wild, I really mean it. These mongoose lemurs would be at the very northern part of the island, and then we'd have our ring-tailed lemurs down all the way in the south. So totally different habitats, different food availability, and different adaptations to survive. There are 108 species of lemurs still living in Madagascar, so quite a few different lemurs living in Madagascar. And for those of you who might be concerned about where Rico just hopped, he just leapt over my head. We don't do any touching or interacting with the lemurs here, so he knows I'm not going to bother him, so he's comfortable hopping all around, getting to where he needs to go. He just saw a really good leap getting to his other basket over here, getting some more food. And let's talk about the food that he's eating. He's got some folivore chow. So that's looks like little brown biscuits in there. And that is a specially formulated diet for him because he eats a kind of a lower carb lemur diet. So he is going to have a lot more fiber in his diet, a lot less of the sugars that other lemurs might have. You also might see little bits of vegetable in there. They like things like cabbage or broccoli or celery or carrot. We also have lemurs here who get more fruit in their diet. We have lemurs here who get more nuts or beans. We have lemurs here who get bugs and worms in their diet. So it really depends on the animal what we put in their food, because again, they can live in totally different parts of Madagascar, have different adaptations to their habitat and different needs. So with that being said, I am going to move on over to our ring-tailed lemurs. And I know it's a little hard to see as I move. I promise I'll settle and we won't all get vertigo together. So here we go. We have our ring-tailed lemur Persephone sitting nice and calmly on this stump right here, eating her breakfast. And if you look, I'm not going to get too close because Persephone is a little bit more skittish about people around her, and I want to respect her boundaries. But you can see she's got a nice big chunk of brown chow in her mouth. Her cheeks kind of bulging out there. And she's got a nice big chunk of chow down on that stump underneath her. So that is more of a kind of omnivorous or opportunistic eater primate chow. It's going to have more carbs, a little more sugar in it, maybe a little lower in fiber. And so these chows, these primate chows, are just like dog food or cat food, where, you know, dogs and cats are different species, so they're going to need different foods. Ring-tailed lemurs and mongoose lemurs are different species. They're going to need different foods, slightly different concentrations of nutrients, sugars, all kinds of things like that. So she's actually got a mix of both the folivore chow and the kind of bigger primate chow. So smaller little stick there is the folivore chow, and then we've got our bigger chunk of primate chow. And then over here we have our male Pherecydes, and he's hanging out in a basket, eating his breakfast this morning. I'll try to sneak past the leaves so you can get a good view of him in there. Now you've noticed we've spread out the food, so there's multiple places to eat. That's because lemurs are female dominant, meaning girls are always in charge. So we want to make sure that the boys have a chance to eat and we don't have any conflict over breakfast this morning. So he's got a few different options for where to eat. And you're going to see probably some displacement in a second. There we go. Beautifully done. We have Persephone going over to grab the best pieces of food she can find. And we saw Pherecydes hop right out of her way immediately. So he knows what female dominance is. He knows girls are in charge. And he knows it's his job to move out of her way. And the reason that girls are in charge in lemur families is that everybody's the same size. Boys aren't any bigger than girls. They aren't any tougher at fighting, anything like that. And so girls have a lot of work to do. If these two were a breeding pair, they're not, but if they were in the wild, then she might be the one having babies and raising those babies. And it takes a lot of energy to be a mom. There's a lot of work that goes into it physically with her body and also with protecting her family and raising her babies. So she's going to need to have the best access to food, to the safest places to sleep, all of that. And so Pherecydes knows that's the order of things. So he's going to hop right out of her way and make sure she gets what she needs. And she's just going to move around and grab all her favorite bits of food. So you can see she's concentrating on some of the chunks of vegetable in there because those are some of the tastiest things she can find. And she's using her nose to find those things. And ring-tailed lemurs get a different diet because they live in a region called the Spiny Desert or Spiny Forest, where food isn't always that available. So they are going to try to eat whatever they can, whenever they can. And that means they may sometimes be eating things that aren't as tasty to them. They love fruit. They love craisins and raisins are some of their favorite treats here, but those don't exactly grow on trees in Madagascar. So they're going to eat fruit when they can, but they will also eat vegetables, leaves, bark, twigs. They're also going to eat Other things they can get their hands on, like insects, maybe even a small lizard if it comes across them and they're hungry enough. So they're going to be much more opportunistic about what they eat because they have to be in the more harsh environment where they live. And I'll move over to join Persephone again. She's been really making the rounds, getting the best food piles she can out of all these different spots. Although it looks like Vericity's cleaned off this plate for her, so she might go to the next one. And I think I might pause for a moment here to see if we want to pause for our Kahoot or our questions, or if I should keep talking for a little longer, Joe.
Let's just go a little bit longer. Let's maybe hear some of the threats that are facing lemurs and a bit about their conservation. Then we'll jump into the Kahoot action.
Absolutely, we can do that. All right, so it's always helpful to have direction because I like to joke that we could go a billion directions when we talk about lemurs. So we'll focus on some threats facing them and some conservation for right now. Lemurs live on a giant island, as I mentioned, Madagascar, but that giant island has a lot of threats facing it, many to do with the fact that it has a very high population of people, 80% of whom are farmers, so about 26, 27 million people living on that island, and 80% of them are farmers. And when I say farmers, I mean most of them are farming in small areas, feeding their family, maybe having enough to sell and feed other people, but really not large-scale farming operations like those of us in the West might be used to. And also, it's an island that's mostly in the tropics, so climate change has had a huge impact on that island over the years and continues to do so as of right now. And like any island that or any land that has been colonized by Europeans or Westerners in its past, that has a big impact on the sustainability of the economy, of the conservation programs there. So the conservation threats facing Madagascar are complicated and they are nuanced. So I always like to mention that up at the front because it's very easy for us as people living in the West to look at other places and say, oh, that's so terrible, they don't care about their animals. And that is not as easy to say. It's not that simple. So when we work on the conservation threats facing Madagascar, we have to consider things like what resources are available to people and how much are they in need of the land just as much as the lemurs are. Oh, looks like our ring-tailed lemurs are finishing up their breakfast. Sorry, I just want to make sure I stay with them. So when we have people and animals using the same resources in the same land, we have to look at a holistic approach to our conservation. So we have issues like farmland encroaching on natural habitat. We also have issues like mining operations or illegal logging operations for things like rosewood, which is a precious hardwood that takes many, many, many years to mature and grow. And then we also have considerations like the lack of infrastructure for human health issues and other things that can help support people there. So our work in Madagascar focuses actually a lot more on people than it does directly on lemurs, at helping with infrastructure, at helping provide resources to the people in Madagascar, which are the Malagasy people. That's both the language and the people of Madagascar. So the Malagasy people who are interested in studying conservation, working in conservation, researching lemurs, following that path into the science fields, and making sure those resources are available, and that we can team up with those folks and have a community-based approach to conservation, looking at farming practices, looking at scientific study, looking at all different areas. I also want to mention that we've talked a bit about the different habitats in Madagascar and the number of different species that we have. With 108 different species, lemurs are truly the most endangered group of mammals on the planet, and over 90% of all those 108 lemur species are considered endangered or critically endangered. So they are facing a lot of threats, and conservation is incredibly important for these animals and all the other incredibly unique animals and plants that live on Madagascar and are found nowhere else in the world.
All right, Megan, that's perfect. And I'm really glad that you framed it that way, because it is really easy to make villains of people. But in reality, people just want to be safe and, feel they have the resources that they need. And, with opportunities and the right jobs and things like that, everybody wants to kind of protect the place that they live. And I have a friend who runs a great organization called Planet Madagascar. And when he works with the villagers, they didn't realize that other places didn't have lemurs. And when they found that out, they were so excited, and, that they had something so special under their care. And they've been amazing partners in the conservation of lemurs in the forest ever since.
Absolutely. And it's important to remember, too, with an island as huge as Madagascar, without a huge amount of infrastructure, there are many Malagasy people who have never heard of lots of different types of lemurs or never seen them. Many Malagasy people never see a lemur in the wild during their lifetime if they're from one of the big cities or if they're from a region, say, in the high plateau area where you don't have as many lemurs populating the area. So just like there are lots of us who aren't familiar with some of the animals that might be inhabiting our backyard or our woods because those animals are secretive and stay away from us, same thing can happen in Madagascar.
All right. Let's take a moment here and do our Kahoot quiz together. See how well our students were listening and what they learned today. And let's find out who our top 3 are. So I'm going to pop this link up here on the screen. It is kahoot.it. If you have a computer handy, you can hop on that, head to kahoot.it. It's going to ask you for a PIN number. So I'm going to share my screen right now. And I will give you that PIN number. So here we go. There it is. I see students have already started to join. So today's PIN number is 529-7374. Now, if you do have technology right at your seat, that's awesome. You can join there. If not, your teacher can maybe pop it up on the front board and you can yell out your answers to him or her. Or if you can't connect, just shout out your answers and see how you do at the end. If you have a tablet or a phone, you could scan that little QR code. It'll bring you right in up there on the kind of the top right. We have 4 questions queued up for you today. There's 2 true and false, 2 multiple choice, 20 seconds for each question. If you get it right, you're getting some points. If you get it right and you do it quick, you get even more points. If you get it wrong, even if you got it wrong really, really quick, doesn't matter. We need that right answer in there. I see we've got already 50 students or groups here in with us, which is great. We'll give it another maybe 15 seconds or so because lots of names are still popping in here. And I love these auto-generated names. We've got the super gecko, the zany bat, the golden llama. I'm just scanning through to see if we have any lemur names that have popped up today. Doesn't look like I don't see any lemur names yet.
We'll have to have a talk with Kahoot about representation of lemurs.
I lied. The snowy lemur. I don't know if that's the exactly accurate, but we have a snowy lemur in here. So there we go. So maybe 10 more seconds because names are still popping in. 5 more seconds. The daring turtle sneaking in. All right, let's get our quiz started. Reminder, 20 seconds for each question. Get those answers in as quickly as you can. Here we go. So our first question. This was in the intro today. How many species of lemurs are at the Duke Lemur Center? 4, 7, 10, or 14 species? Still got about 10 seconds on the clock. Lots of answers coming in nice and quick. So how many was it? 4, 7, 10, or 14 species? All right. Most students went with 14. That's absolutely right. And Megan, that's just a small fraction of, you mentioned about 108 species that can be found in Madagascar.
Absolutely, yeah. And even though it's a small fraction, we do have the most lemurs outside of Madagascar in the world. So most of those animals, most of those lemurs, you're not going to see unless you brave the wilds of Madagascar and have a very, very good Malagasy guide.
All right, the great wildcat is holding on that top spot, but the snowy lemur is on the board in 4th. So let's see if our lemur power can push their way to the top. Here comes a true and false. Madagascar is the largest island in the world. Was that true? Or is that false? Oh, 40 answers came in about 2 seconds flat. Not too shabby. We've got more answers trickling in. Madagascar, was it or is it the largest island in the world? Is that true or is that false? Could not trick our crew. It is the fourth largest island in the world. And it's almost kind of with the amazing biodiversity and how long it's been separated from Africa. It really is kind of an amazing world onto its own, Madagascar. Okay. The great wildcat is still holding on to that top spot. We have a true and false coming up. Lemurs are female dominant. The females are in charge. Is that true or is that false? Lemurs are female dominant. I have a feeling we're not going to trick anybody on this one. We talked about this, and we got to see a good example of a little bit of showing who's boss. And I'm absolutely right. This overwhelming student said that is true. The females are in charge. Ooh, the friendly hawk has jumped into first place, but the snowy lemur has slid into second as well. Let's see what happens in our final question. What are some threats facing lemurs? Was it a large population of people? Was it loss of habitat? Is it climate change? Or is it all of the above? So lots of people, loss of their habitat, climate change, or all of the above. Ooh, a little bit of the spread. This always happens. People get really excited when they see the first one works, but sometimes we trick you by making it a couple of them or all of the above like we did in this case. So let's take a look at our podium. In third place, we've got the friendly hawk. In the second spot, we've got the rapid wombat. And holding down that top spot, we have, oh, Megan, would you look at that? The snowy lemur has swept in and taken that top spot. Wow, look at that. That's never happened before. Very, very cool. All right, let's stop that screen share and let's switch gears. Let's go to live Q&A action. If you're tuning in via YouTube, use that chat sidebar. We want your questions. Let us know where you're tuning in from. I'm going to start visiting our camera classrooms as well. So let's start with one of those groups. We have, let's see, Miss LeBlanc's crew, some 6th graders joining us here in Ontario, in Canada. Let's bring them front and center. Hey, 6th grade, how are we doing today?
Good.
All right, we're ready for you, bud.
What species of lemurs do you have at the center?
Ooh, this question always feels like a pop quiz, so it's hard for me to remember them all right at this moment, but I can list off the ones that pop into my head right now. I also will mention that we have a great free virtual tour video series that's free on our website, which you can find very easily. I'm sure Joe will be putting it in the chat if he hasn't already. And then if you also search Lemur and Duke, you will find our website. So that has all the species you can see if you come to the center, a nice great video about each of them. But some that come into mind are, of course, the mongoose lemurs, who are right in front of us, the ring-tailed lemurs we already met, a very cool species called cockerel shafak, and another one called eye that are super rare to see, or blue-eyed black lemur. We have red ruffed lemurs, black and white ruffed lemurs, mouse lemurs, fat-tailed dwarf lemurs, and there are others I'm forgetting, but you are welcome to check that out online. We have great resources on our website about the different species we have here.
Perfect. All right. Well, we do have that link popped up there. You can jot that down, or if you search on Google, it'll come up nice and quick. There's not too many other Duke Lemur Centers around, so that should come up nice front and center for you. All right. Let's grab another class, another camera classroom here. This time we're going to go to Florida. We've got some 2nd graders hanging out with us. Let me bring them front and center. Hey, Miss Gonzalez's crew, how we doing? Awesome. All right. Who's got a lemur question for us?
How long do they live for?
Great. I heard that question. How long do they live for? So that's a great question. So that very much depends on the type of lemur. And I'm sorry our lemur viewing isn't great during this because they're being lemurs and going into the forest. So I'm going to move around so we can see them better while I talk. So lemurs, again, there's over 100 different species. If you're tiny like a mouse lemur, you're about the size of a mouse. So you're not going to live as long. Those lemurs in the wild might only live a few years, maybe 4 or 5 years. And here, the gray mouse lemurs we have here are going to live quite a bit longer. They're going to live 10, maybe 12 or 13 years. But if you're a bigger lemur, like the lemurs we're meeting today, in the wild, you're probably going to live into your early to mid 20s. That's a nice long life. And here at the Lemur Center, you can live into your late 20s or even your early maybe even mid-30s, but that's really old. So in general, most lemur species are going to live longer here than they would in the wild. And that makes sense because we're here to take care of them. We have these big fences to keep them where they're supposed to be and where they're safe and to keep predators from coming in. We have vets on standby to take care of them. But that's a big generalization and a great question to research more because would you believe it? We don't actually know how long some lemurs live in the wild. It's really hard to study. So maybe all of you could find that answer one day.
All right. There's a great species, one of my favorite, the eye. And so they're very rarely seen because they come out at night, but they are such a cool species of lemur. So definitely one to check out if you have some time to do a little research after our live event today. And I can see one of our friends there in the open again, close to the open. Very cool. Okay.
Maybe scent marking.
All right. So you mentioned scent marking. What's going on there when they're doing that?
So that is really important for lemurs. And thank you for that segue because I realized I missed a really important subject, which is what is a lemur? So lemurs are a type of primate, but they're an early primate called a strepsirrhine primate. And all you have to worry about with that is the rhine part of it. Rhine, we know probably best from pop culture as a rhinoplasty, which we kind of commonly refer to as surgery on the nose. So rhine has to do with your nose. Lemurs have long, wet noses. That's a really important part of being a lemur. And so they use those long, wet noses to get all kinds of information from the world around them. So as we can see Persephone, let me help point her out. I know it's hard for my camera to focus with the light here, but she's in the trees there and she's hopping around, she's sniffing everything, and she's occasionally stopping, and it looks like she's just rubbing her butt on things, but really she's using her scent gland she has under her tail. Oh, my camera focus is all off. Because she needs to mark that territory and make sure everybody around her knows that this is Persephone's bamboo forest. This is where she hangs out. And so that scent smells only like her. Her companion Barycides has scent glands that only smell like him. And so scent marking is a really important part of being a lemur because they get lots of information from smelling those marks. They can smell if it's a lemur they know or they don't know, if it's a boy or a girl. They can even smell if it's an older lemur or a younger lemur. So kind of like we learn to read and write and get information from that, they learn a lot about each other through the smells that they leave behind and encounter.
All right. Very, very cool. YouTube classes. I can see there's several out there. Don't be shy. If you have a question, please use the chat and pop it in there. But in the meantime, we will go to Missouri with some fifth graders hanging out with us. Let's get our class in Missouri front and center. Hey, fifth graders, how we doing? All right. There they are.
All right.
How do they climb so well?
Excellent question. How do they climb so well? And it has to do with some of their primate characteristics. So lemurs as primates have a few things in common with us. And one of those characteristics is that they have grasping hands. So their thumbs kind of go the opposite direction of their other fingers. We have fully opposable thumbs, so meaning that our thumb goes the opposite direction of all of our other fingers. So we can do this and touch each finger individually. That's really useful for picking small things, having a lot of really fine movement. Lemurs have kind of a grip that goes like this. They can grab and hold on to something round like a branch or a bamboo pole as they're going up. And they also have that grasping foot as well. So you can, it's a little hard to see. I don't want to disturb them. I know the light makes it hard. But as they're sitting here having a lovely grooming session, one of them actually has her foot or his foot wrapped around that bamboo pole there. So they can grab with their hands and their feet, making them very, very good at climbing. Another characteristic they share in common with us is they have fingernails instead of claws. And believe it or not, that little difference helps with climbing because when you have fingernails, that means you can use the tips of your fingers and grip with the tips of your fingers much better. When you have claws, that kind of overshadows the rest of your paw if you're an animal like a tiger. And so it might make it harder to climb for some of those animals. So those hands and feet are really, really useful for climbing around and moving so well in the trees.
Okay, great question. We have another camera classroom to visit this time. Where are we going next? We need to bring in our fifth graders here. Donkin, grade 5-6 class. All right. How are we doing today, 5-6s? There they are.
We're here. Hello.
Awesome. Who's got a question for us?
We do. Camera's right here. We got Alex going to ask a question.
How long have you been researching lemurs?
Ooh, so I know it was about researching lemurs. Did you catch the rest of that, Joe?
Yeah, they're wondering how long you've been researching lemurs, maybe working with lemurs, and maybe the center in general.
Yeah, absolutely. So my job personally here is that I'm the education manager, meaning that I take all the cool research and conservation and other things that we do, I learn all about it, and then I teach everyone else about it. So I don't personally do research on the lemurs, and there's a lot of staff here who work around the research, but we don't directly do the research, but it's all very important to kind of go together. In terms of the whole Lemur Center, we actually were started as a research center back in 1966, so over 55 years ago. And we have always been a non-invasive research center. So that means that no lemurs were ever harmed or hurt for the research that we do here. The most that ever happens is anything we would do for a regular vet exam. We might say draw a little extra blood while a lemur's in for their annual wellness check and they are getting their full exam. Maybe we'll save some of that and a researcher could look at that later. Or our animal care team could use it to run tests and check on the lemurs, make sure they're doing okay. Otherwise, the lemurs are not going to be harmed. They're not going to be stressed out. We're going to make sure that the lemurs are as happy and healthy as possible for their lives here.
All right. Well, we have time. We can speed through another round of our camera classrooms, but while we let them get another question ready, and we're going to go in a random order this time just to keep them on their toes. I wonder, with lemurs being so threatened, are you still able to bring new lemurs to the center, or is the population you have, obviously they're going to breed and have young there, but is that the kind of the population that you have to work with?
Absolutely. So the Lemur Center definitely doesn't operate alone. We are not an island, although lemurs are from an island. So we work with a bunch of other zoos and aquariums all across the US and North America as part of the Association of Zoos and Aquariums, or the AZA. And you'll see that certification on a lot of zoo websites, a lot of facility websites. And that means we work with all those different organizations to carefully plan our breeding and bringing animals back and forth to different zoos so we make sure we have the best genetic matches, the best possibility of healthy babies for these animals moving forward. The only possibility of adding new animals to that mix is with other zoos, with other animals that are already in human care. There is no bringing lemurs out of the wild at this point because that is not helpful to lemurs anymore. Our whole goal is to have a genetic safety net here, have healthy animals here while we work on the conservation issues facing Madagascar. And if pulling animals out of the wild is going to make things much worse for lemurs in Madagascar, then it's not helping, and we don't want to hurt. We want to help overall. We have worked with a zoo in Madagascar in the past to bring 2 blue-eyed black lemurs here to the Lemur Center from that zoo. They had totally different genetics, a totally different line, lineage, and they were able to successfully have 2 babies since they've moved here. So that's a whole new group of animals that we have to add to our breeding population and help keep them healthy. So we have to get creative with other zoos all around the world, but mostly we work within the US, and no lemurs are coming to us from the wild in Madagascar.
All right. Let's go to our class in Florida, our second graders. Let's see if they're still there. Give me a big wave, second graders. There they are. All right. Who's got a question?
Okay, Joshua. Hey, Joshua, what's your question? Quick, my love. Okay, it's okay. You want Sebastian to go? Yeah. Okay, go ahead, Sebastian.
How long are they in the sun for?
Oh, that's a new question. I haven't heard before. So how long are they in the sun for? They're sitting in the sun, right? And they seem to be really enjoying that. Ring-tailed lemurs are kind of a species for like a sun-worshipping pose where they sit kind of facing the sun, opening up their belly. We're seeing a little bit of it, but I'm hoping they might do the full version very soon. And here in North Carolina, it was a bit chilly compared to what they're used to this morning. It was in the low 40s overnight. And so these lemurs are soaking up the sun to kind of warm up their bodies and get nice and comfy for the day. In the middle of the summer, they're going to spend a lot less time in the sun, just like we do. They are primates like us. They want to keep their bodies in a nice, comfortable temperature. So when it's cool out, they spend a lot more time in the sun. When we talk about when they're active and awake, these lemurs are going to be active and awake when the sun is out. These ring-tailed lemurs are going to be what's called diurnal, or active during the day. There are lots of lemur species that are nocturnal, meaning active overnight, like the ii, who is my favorite lemur species, as well as Joe's, I think. Again, really hope you check them out when you check out our website. And then the mongoose lemurs we met earlier are what's called ephemeral. So lots of lemurs are actually an in-between. If it's really nice during the day, during, say, the wet season when there's lots of food in Madagascar and there's lots of things to eat, then they might be diurnal or active during the day. But let's say the dry season hits and it's really hard to find food and it's just too hot and dry out. They might switch to being nocturnal. So mongoose lemurs and the lemurs that are related to them are known for kind of choosing which activity they want to have.
All right, where should we go now? Let's go to our grade 5-6 class. Let's bring them back in for another question. There they are.
I was wondering how much food lemurs eat in a day.
Okay, I don't know if you caught all of that, but they're curious about how much food those lemurs are eating in a day.
Oh, that is a great question. And again, for a lot of my answers, it's going to say, it depends. If you're a tiny mouse lemur, you're going to eat a tiny amount of food because mouse lemurs only weigh, I think, around maybe 100 grams when they're fully grown, but don't quote me on that. They are very, very small. I think they're actually smaller than that. So they're going to eat a similarly small amount of food. Their entire diet for the day fits in one of those tiny paper cups that are kind of the things we use in elementary school, really tiny. The ring-tailed lemurs are going to eat a bigger diet. So you actually saw their whole diet for the day, all those chunks of lemur chow and vegetable. And then aside from that, they're going to eat all the leaves around them in the forest. Occasionally, they can find fruits and flowers and other things to eat. So the amount they eat depends on the size of the lemur and also the time of year.
Okay, Miss LeBlanc's grade 6s. We're ready for you. I think I see someone ready for us too.
How high can lemurs jump?
Ooh, excellent question. So I'll tell you how high they can jump, but lemurs are more often going to jump across than they are up. Because if you think about when they're moving through the forest, they're going to jump from tree to tree a lot more often than they're going to jump from the ground back up to the tree. They typically climb if they're climbing from the ground up and into a tree. So in terms of how high they can jump, I'd say most lemur species can jump a few feet, several feet, even in the air. So for our US classes, that's the measurements I'm going to use because I'm used to it. So I'd say 3 to 4 feet is an easy kind of jump for a lemur up from the ground. But again, that's not going to be their main way to move through the trees. They have those grasping hands and feet. They're going to climb much more often. When it comes to jumping horizontally, lemurs can jump pretty far. Most lemurs can jump an easy 5 or 6 feet between trees, maybe even up to like 9 or 10 feet. But the longest lemur jump is going to be from the shafak. The shafak lemurs, there's multiple different species. They're all excellent jumpers, and they are going to actually spend their days moving through the trees by jumping sideways between the trees, and they can leap up to 30 feet in a single bound sideways through the trees. So their sideways jumps are much more impressive than their jumps up and down.
All right, pretty darn impressive. Let's get Mrs. Crouch's crew. They can have our final question here today. There they are.
What are there any predators to lemurs?
I love this question because I secretly love carnivores and love getting to talk about them. So there is a main predator of the lemurs. It's called the fossa, and that's spelled Fossa. They are a super cool animal that is also only found on Madagascar and also critically endangered. So when we talk about lemur predators, I always want to mention that they are perfectly adapted to hunt lemurs. The fossa lives around the edge of the island. Think of it kind of like a mongoose and a bobcat mixed together. They're a really interesting looking animal. Highly recommend you look up and learn about them too. And they are perfectly adapted to climb trees. They have rear rotating ankle joints, meaning their feet can flip upside down when they're climbing down a tree. So they can climb up and down trees looking for lemurs in the wild. But predators are just as important to the Madagascar ecosystem as lemurs are. So we always have to remember that even though, of course, I would hate to imagine any of our lemurs getting eaten by a predator in the wild, predators are a really, really important part of the ecosystem to keep all the populations in check. So we have to be just as worried about the fossa and the other carnivores of Madagascar as we do about the lemurs.
All right, well, let's get things started with a huge shout out to our classrooms who tuned in via YouTube today, to our camera classrooms. Thank you so much for being with us. Megan, we love every single trip we get to take to the Lemur Forest, and I know that we're running out of time because it is getting cooler and they're going to want to be nice and warm inside. So thank you. The last couple of months, we've loved our trips down to Duke Lemur Center and getting to meet the amazing lemur species and learn about some of the cool conservation work.
Absolutely. Very happy to host you all, and hopefully we can do lots more fun programs this fall and winter, even though the lemurs might be inside.
That's right. Okay, well, let's bring in our classrooms. Let's get a huge goodbye and thank you. Go crazy, wave. Let's see if the lemurs can hear you as they're relaxing after their breakfast. Thank you so much for being with us today, everybody. I hope you have a great rest of the week, and we can't wait to see you in another Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants event. Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.